All right, Alexander, we have to do an update on Assange, and it looks like his request to not be extradited got denied. Is that correct?
I think that's essentially true. Now, I mean, I have to say that before I explain what's happened, he does have one last legal card left to play in England. I'm becoming deeply skeptical about whether or not that's really a wise thing. But what basically happened was, if you remember, he won the case in the lower court. District Judge Baritza said he shouldn't be sent to the US because if he was, his life was at risk because of the terrible conditions in the US prison system. So the US then appealed that decision to the High Court. The High Court, incredibly to my mind, decided to accept, after the case had been decided by Baritza, assurances that the US gave that he would not be put through the kind of prison system that Baritza thought he would be. I mean, things that has been explained to us by, amongst others, Robert Barnes, that in fact these assurances aren't worth the paper that they're written on, but the High Court decided nonetheless to accept them. And it decided to accept them despite the fact that they had been provided after District Judge Baritza made her decision, and despite the fact that, as far as I could see, there were no reasons why the United States couldn't have given those assurances earlier for Baritza herself to consider them. Anyway, that was what the High Court decided. So they allowed the US's appeal, and they gave directions that basically the lower court, the district, the court below, should go ahead and order Assange's extradition. So Assange then appealed that decision by the High Court to the Supreme Court. The High Court said that there was an important legal issue that the Supreme Court could look at. That was whether assurances could be considered after the lower court had made its decision. The High Court said that was an important legal point. The Supreme Court, I think to many people's astonishment and dismay, including mine, has said that it is not even an arguable point and has refused to allow his appeal. So that whole line of argument has now ended. The only legal card Assange has left is that he can now bring an appeal against all of Baritza's other judgment, in which she said that it was acceptable to send Assange back to the United States because because of all the so-called, all the legal points, all the claims that the US had made against him. I mean, he's argued that that's a political case, that the United States, that the United States hasn't really made it out. Anyway, it would be a detailed and complicated case, difficult to explain simply and straightforwardly. But anyway, that is what that is the only legal card he has left to play. Personally, I'm going to say it straightforwardly, I don't think it's an option for him. I think that with the line of decisions that the High Court has made, I've come round very much to the view that the only place where Assange stands any chance is within the legal system of the United States. If you remember, months ago, we had this discussion with Robert Barnes, and Robert Barnes was making all kinds of important legal arguments that could be made in the course of a hearing in the United States. Importantly, that hearing would be before a jury, even if it was a carefully selected and carefully vetted jury. But it seems to me that realistically, however difficult it would be to argue his case in the United States, it's looking to me impossible that he's going to achieve anything in Britain. The judiciary has closed ranks against him. The British judiciary have closed ranks against him. They're not prepared to throw out this extradition request, and they're going to extradite him to the United States. So better from his point of view to fight this case where he has a chance of winning, which is in the United States rather than in Britain.
Yeah. Why would you think he has a chance of winning in the United States as opposed to Britain if it's been the U.S. pressure on Britain that has led to him being extradited? I mean, wouldn't logic say that if the U.S. is exerting so much pressure on the U.K. to extradite him and they got what they wanted,
Yeah.
well, if he's going to go to the U.S. is going to get what they want in the U.S. I mean, it seems, logical there.
That is the very high probability, but you've got to balance the probability, which is the fact that he would be sent to prison if he was sent, if he found himself in the US, against what I have to say to me now looks like the certainty that if he fights this case, goes on fighting this case in Britain, he will lose at every hearing. Now, I say that it's a high probability, but I think in the US he has a chance, and I'll tell you why I think he's got a chance. Firstly, he's got the protection of the Constitution of the United States, including the First Amendment. He has a route all the way through to the Supreme Court of the United States. He has an extremely powerful legal community in the United States, including people like Robert Barnes, who understand First Amendment and constitutional law issues. And also, and this is the important difference, the British judges are intimidated by the power of the United States government. The British government is intimidated by the power of the US government. The American courts are not to anything like the same degree. So I think that it's a difficult thing to have to say, but I think that within the United States itself, he would get the best possible legal representation. He would get people, well, let's say Robert Barnes, but people of that caliber to defend him. He would get, might be others too, people like Dershowitz, for example. I don't like Dershowitz as a human being, but on these constitutional issues, he's very good. So, you would get probably a very strong legal team. You get courts and judges who are bound by the Constitution of the United States, which is, of course, British judges are not. You would get a Supreme Court, which is obviously founded to defend the Constitution. And at first instance, at the first hearing, at the trial, you'd even get a jury. And he's had no jury in Britain. So I don't want to rate his chances high, but when you're looking at a situation where he is certain to lose in Britain, but has a small chance of winning in the United States, you go with a small chance rather than for the certainty of losing. That's how it seems to me.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm a little more cynical on it.
I'm
Maybe
completely
once upon a
cynical.
time,
I'm being completely
the U.S.
cynical.
legal system operated like that, but I don't know. It seems like with each passing day and month,
I know.
year,
I'm being
the US
completely
just
cynical
doesn't
about
operate
it entirely.
in that manner that you say. What was he charged with again? What's he being charged with?
It's
What's he being held
Espionage
with again
Act.
in
It's
the UK?
proceedings under the Espionage Act. But remember, he's the first journalist to be prosecuted in this kind of way under the Espionage Act, and that might also play to his advantage in the US. But, Alex, I'm completely cynical. I'm going to say it further. I'm not just cynical. I am despairing because this is a disastrous prosecution at every conceivable level. It's going to do immense damage to freedom of speech, freedom of media, abilities to conduct investigative reporting, both in Britain and in the United States, and indeed everywhere. But, if there's a 1% chance it exists in the US, better a 1% chance than a 0 chance. And that's the tactical decision I would make.
Yeah. It just a final thought. It seems like it's par for the course given the trajectory of things. You have we've been covering a lot the the Ukraine crisis, and from an economic side of things, we are effectively looking at the end of the USD as reserve currency. The sanctioning of the Russian central bank means that there's pretty much been a loss of trust in the Western financial architecture. You have Biden in the White House. Enough said there, and we've seen the censorship over the last, I don't know, say 5-6 years since Trump beat Hillary in 2016. We've seen the censorship ramp up to take us to a level where you have entire media channels being blocked from accessing the internet. You have people deplatformed, and Alex Jones too. The list is so long. It's just hard to even know where to begin and where to end at this point. So maybe the legal framework is just par for the course as to where the West is heading. I don't know.
I'm afraid you're absolutely right. But at the end of the day, what else can one do? Either one fights, and one has to fight this through the courts, or one gives up. Sometimes you can win in the courts, even in this kind of desperate situation. I mean, we saw that in the Carl Rittenhouse case, for example, in which, people were involved. We've seen that in some of the cases that went to the Supreme Court over the mandates. So, one can either give way to total despair and give up fighting, or one can go on fighting. Now, I think one should go on fighting, because if one gives up fighting, then one is giving up the battle and the other side has won. So it's the only option. The only thing I would say is, given that the situation in Britain looks to me completely hopeless, I think that it's better fought in the United States. We've discussed this many times in many programs. Ultimately, it is only in the United States that there can be a change, because there is still the Constitution of the United States. And even if that has been disregarded increasingly and to an increasing degree, still it is there. And, you will always perhaps hopefully find judges and juries and lawyers who will understand its importance and who will fight to uphold it. Whereas in Britain, I have to say, the High Court judiciary has clearly closed ranks.
Yeah, the UK really failed on this one.
Absolutely, totally.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Any timeline, real quick, as to?
Well, if Assange does go for this appeal, which I'm afraid I think he will. I mean, I've given my views. I don't think he's going to follow them. Everything I've heard about him is that he's determined to avoid extradition to the US. I think he will try and bring this appeal to the High Court against Baritsa's decision. I'm afraid that's another year, probably, before we have a decision there. Maybe a year, unless the High Court throws out the appeal instantly, which it could do, I suppose. But we could be looking still at some months, or perhaps even a year, before a final decision is made to send him to the US. Of course, if he goes to the US, then that's a different legal system completely, one I'm not familiar with. Then we'd have to speak to Robert Barnes and people like that, and he would be able to give us some better sense of what the timeline there would be.
Yeah. The fact that he's fighting so hard not to get extradited to the U.S. to me tells me that he doesn't want to go. I mean, he's very,
absolutely.
Very
There's any doubt about that
on American soil.
Maybe no doubt about that too. Can I finish with a particularly bitter twist? On the 23rd of March, he's due to marry. He's due to marry Stella Morris, his long-standing partner, who is the mother of his two children. And he's obviously now been given this terrible decision in the run-up to that marriage. And there is, for me, a particular cruelty about that. I mean, I can't see why they couldn't have delayed it for just a few more days to let him and his partner at least marry without having this terrible outcome, behind them. But there is a cruelty to this whole thing, which also, frankly, appalls me.
You're dealing with people that don't have the slightest bit of humanity or empathy to them. So
I agree.
Cruelty is the name of the game. Yeah. Cruelty is the name of the game.
It's like a cat playing with a mouse, and that's how it feels.
All right, we'll leave it there, everybody. The Duran.locals.com and Rumble. Check us out on Rumble, everybody. You'll find a link to our locals page on Rumble as well. Take care.